You have the Liberals, that would be the end of the world if Carney is winning. That will be also the end of the world if Poilievre is winning. We are paying the counter tariffs. It's another tax, 25%. And Poilievre is okay with that. And Carney is okay with that. And they're saying, we love you so much, Canadians, that we will impose you more. And by the way, it can create a recession. You will lose your job, but that's okay. He's doing politics. He's not a leader. He's a follower. He's following the polls. If you vote for your ideas, if you vote for what you believe, I believe that we can have our first candidate elected at this election who will support Poilievre in Parliament when he will be a real conservative, and we will shame him when he won't.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Furiously Curious Show. Before we get started here, just a little bit about myself. So this is my show, I'm the host, but this is only part of what I do. I'm also a coach for Furiously Curious Coaching, my coaching company. And I work with business owners and executives to be successful in their roles as a business owner or whatever it is, without sacrificing faith, family, and free time. And so I have a 10-week coaching program that's extremely successful. You can see that on the reviews on my website at furiouslycurious.co, along with all the other information about the coaching I offer. So just wanted to say that up front. But with that, I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Furiously Curious Show. I'm your host, Calvin Rantberg. Today on the show, we have Maxime Bernier, head of the Populist Party of Canada, who is currently campaigning to be the next Prime Minister of Canada in the federal election on April 28th. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you being here in person. It's awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very pleased. And for me, that's important to do podcasts. It's a new way to communicate your message, and you have more time to explain your policies. So I'm very pleased to have that opportunity today with you.
Thank you. So I want to go back to 2018 when you were running for the Conservative Party and you lost that against, I believe, Andrew Scheer was at the time.
Yeah.
And then you started your own party, the People's Party of Canada.
Yeah.
What made you leave? Maybe you could take us back through that again, because I think a lot of people looking back, or how you've been viewed by a lot of conservatives, is just crazy Max and stuff like that. And so just go back to, in your own words, what happened there?
Yeah, so in 2017, I did the leadership contest to be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I didn't win with 49% of the vote, and I tried to work with Andrew Scheer, the leader that was elected at that time, with Andrew Scheer for the next 15 months. So in 2018, I had a meeting with Andrew Scheer, a private meeting, and the Conservative Party of Canada was looking for their electoral platform for the election of 2019. So my meeting with him, I wanted him to take some of our ideas that were my ideas were very popular with the membership of the Conservative Party of Canada. I had 49% of the vote. So I had a discussion with him, and I want him to take some of our ideas. And he said no. And I said, why? He said, Maxime.
What were some of those ideas?
That was, ending, at that time it was mass immigration, lower the fewer immigrants in Canada, fighting to abolish the cartel in supply management, dairy, poultry, and eggs, for prices to go down for Canadians consumers. And that was the platform that I was running on during the leadership. And actually, that is the same platform right now. I used the platform that I was running during the leadership contest to build the platform for the People's Party. But I had a discussion with him. I said, no, can you take one of two or three of my ideas? And he said, no. And I said, why? Because I said, my ideas, my platform was very popular with the members. He said, yes, Maxime, but I'm running to be the Prime Minister of Canada, and your ideas are not popular with the population in general, so I won't take any of your ideas. And I said, I won't waste my time with a party that doesn't have the courage to speak about real conservative free market ideas. And that's what he did. And so the platform of the Conservative Party at that election was a little bit like the platform of the Liberal Party of Canada. So I quit and I said, this party is morally and intellectually corrupt. They're not conservative. They're only conservative in name. And when they don't promote conservative ideas, they're giving credibility to the leftist narrative.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. And that was the best decision in my political life. And, the platform that I was running during the leadership contest was the platform of the People's Party, and it's still the same platform, same ideas, and that's why we don't do any polling. We don't do any focus group. We are doing politics with our ideas, by conviction. And what I said at our first election in 2019, actually, I'm saying the same thing today. We just update our platform with new data or new numbers, but it's the same ideas. So that's why we are doing politics very differently than the Conservative or the Liberals. We think that we have the best vision for this country, and we are speaking about it.
So Andrew Scheer ended up losing the election, and then Erin O'Toole came in. Do you regret at all not staying with the party and then running again? And because likely you would have beat Erin O'Toole and been the leader.
I was not the candidate of the establishment of the party. For them, I was I was too conservative and didn't want. And actually, I must say that when I did run for the leadership of the Conservative Party in 2017, I had a lot of support from the members. But at that time, we were 99 conservative MPs, 99. And I had the support on only 4 of them, including myself. So the question is, why, if my ideas were very popular with the membership, why it was not popular with the members of parliament?
Any guesses?
Why because, I was speaking about, for example, no more subsidies to corporations. And you have some MPs, conservative MPs who are living in southern Ontario where GM is and Ford, and they received a lot of subsidies. They don't want to support me for that. I was speaking about abolishing the cartel in milk, dairy, and poultry. Some MPs were in a rural area and they had a lot of dairy producers. They didn't want to support me because they were afraid to lose the support of the dairy producers. So only 3 of my colleagues decided to support me at that time. So that's why, I said, let's create the People's Party. And
And so what would you call yourself? A conservative, a libertarian? Like where do you land?
Populist. The People's Party is a populist party that is promoting conservative values. And yes, libertarian on the economy, a more free market, but also a party that is putting Canada first and our country first by, having a moratorium on immigration. So it's a classical liberal, conservative values, populist party, like the reform in UK with Nigel Farage. Nigel created that party a year ago in UK, and now, and he's fighting for preserving the UK and ending mass immigration. So we are a populist party in line with the populist movement in Western countries.
So what are some of the main issues that set you apart from the Conservative Party?
There's a lot, climate change, for example. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. There's no climate emergency, but the Liberals and the Conservative, they will put more regulations on businesses and new taxes to fight climate change. We won't do that. On immigration, a moratorium, but for the Conservative and the Liberals, they're okay with mass immigration. Actually, Poilievre said that he wants to have 250,000 foreigners a year, plus international students, plus temporary foreign workers, plus refugees. So that would be about 1.5 million foreigners over 3 years. It's mass immigration. We need to stop that. So on balancing the budget, for Poilievre, he's not speaking about balancing the budget. He's okay with the big spending. We are not. We have a plan to balance the budget in 1 year and being fiscally responsible. On the DI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to that radical doctrine or philosophy is destroying the Western civilization values. We will do like President Trump on that. We will stop the funding to promote that ideology. So there's a lot of
And so a lot of classic conservatives, like I'm a member of the Conservative Party, and like they would assume that the Conservatives federally agree with almost a majority of what you said, but I think by omission, because it's not being talked about, they don't really know, and it's quite vague. Is that just a result of the media that we have, or why is that?
Why is that? Because we've been canceled, we the People's Party, by the mainstream media, and a lot of people after 6 years, they don't know that we exist. They don't know what is the People's Party. And that's why, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to do that podcast with you. But, the time is on our side. Actually, when we started the party, we had 1.6% of the vote. We almost tripled our score at the last election in 2021 with 5%. And I don't know what would be the result at this election, but we have a great future. And it's not only the former conservative who are voting for us. There's 40% of the population who didn't vote at the last election. And a lot of them didn't vote because they're looking at the liberals and the conservative, and they said, it's all the same. There's no bold reforms. So that's a nice clientele for us. When I'm doing rallies, I like when I have a person who came to me and said, Mr. Bernier, I never voted. I would vote the first time for you. I like that. And we can have the support of these people because, it's all about ideas for us. Yeah. If it's popular or not in the polls, it's not important. We believe that we have the best vision and we are speaking about it.
Where did that come from, that conviction just to speak about ideas, not if they're specifically popular or not? Because that's, I would say, rare for politicians to do.
Yeah.
Rare for people in general. Like, where does that deep conviction come from? Is that something that was instilled in you by your growing up, or like where did that come from? Because
I'm coming from a riding in Beauce, or a region in Quebec called Beauce. It is the most entrepreneurial region in Quebec. There's a lot of entrepreneurs over there. All my friends started their business and they're entrepreneurs. And so, taking some risk for me, that's normal. You're an entrepreneur, you have to take some risk. And I was elected as a politician. I was a conservative. I was a minister. And I know what it is, what to do to be elected. I just want to tell you what you want to hear today, and I will have more chances to be elected. But, if you want to do bold reforms, you need to speak about it before the election and during the election. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm looking at the country right now. We are going, into a wall at a very high speed with the liberals and maybe a slower speed with the conservative. We need to do these bold reforms, and they're not ready to speak about it. But for me, I think that I know and that I have the best vision because I believe in people. I don't believe in a big fat government that would tell you what to do or what not to do, like I did during COVID-19. Mm-hmm. I was the only one speaking about freedom of choice with informed consent. But the liberals and the conservative, they were in line with the population because at that time, if you are in the opposition in Ottawa or here in BC and you want to be in government, that's your only goal. You do some polling, and during COVID-19, 65% of the population were okay with lockdowns. So you want to be in government, you are going with the flow. Yeah, you're okay with that. Yeah. For us, we said, no, it's not good to do that. It's against, our Charter of Rights. So I'm a fighter and I like to fight. And that's why I'm very proud of our candidates because at the last election, I told our candidates, our goal is to have 4% of the vote. So when I was telling them that, I was telling you won't win with 4% of the vote. But our candidates are there also because of the ideas, and they believe that, our time will come. And if you look at Western countries, populist movements are growing. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult here in Canada because we have a parliamentary system. We don't have any proportionality in our electoral system, but it will come. And our candidates are sharing our ideas and they're ready to fight for Canada. So that's great.
Yeah. So Pierre Poilievre came out last week saying the Conservative Party would not touch abortion at all. do you care about the issues of abortion
Absolutely.
and euthanasia yourself? Like, what are your beliefs around that, and why are you open to discussing it?
Because I want our country to be part of the civilized world, and we can have in this country an abortion. A lady can have an abortion a couple of hours before giving birth. We don't have any legislation on abortion, and Poilievre is okay with that. Go in France, go in UK, go everywhere. There's a legislation on abortion, and we don't have any legislation. And and I will ask people to go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, read our platform on abortion, 2 pages over there. And I'm saying we must have restriction on abortion coming at the second trimester, like other countries. And yes, so I'm not pro-life, I'm not pro-choice, because, I want to have that debate. And I know that more than 60% of the population think that it will be okay to have a restriction on abortion starting at the second trimester. Poilievre doesn't want to speak about that. Poilievre, he has a support of a lot of social conservative, but they must know that Poilievre won't do anything. He's afraid of the mainstream media, and he's okay with killing unborn babies, and that's happening in our country. Shame on him on that. That's another big difference with us and the Conservative Party.
So I'm assuming you know Pierre personally, like you've had, and so why do you think he's doing it this way? Is his goal literally just to get elected, and he doesn't?
It's just to get elected, just to be in government, and
So in a way that would be.
And he won't do any reform. That's why the people are saying, "Oh, you have the Liberals. That will be the end of the world if Carney is winning. That will be also the end of the world if Poilievre is winning." Big deficit, huge inflation, and all these DI philosophy will be there.
Yeah. So you know him personally, and like why do you think he's pushing this? Is he actually a liberal himself?
He's a professional politician. He never had a real boss. He was elected at 24 years old, never had a real job, a real boss, and for the last 20 years, he is in politics and elected. So he is looking at the polls. He's doing politics. He's not a leader. He's a follower. He's following the polls. And I believe that the Canadian population has been manipulated. We are not following the polls. We are speaking about conviction. So Poilievre, his only goal is to be elected. And he's telling you what you want to hear to be elected. And he's afraid of the mainstream media. So if he said that it's okay to reopen the debate on abortion, he won't be able to control the narrative. Poilievre is a very good communicator with the mainstream media, because he's speaking with slogan. And we know his slogan, but there's no meat behind there. There's no meat, and I know that more people understand that now. So his goal is to be in Parliament, and he will be like Stephen Harper. I was a conservative. I was elected in 2006, a minority government. 2008, a minority government. 2011, a majority government with Stephen Harper. I said, okay, we'll do bold reforms, conservative reform, privatization, deregulation. But no, Stephen Harper did the biggest deficit in the history of our country at that time. So, big spender. Stephen Harper was a good manager of a big fat government. That's what he did. And actually, he increased the money to buy votes in Quebec in the equalization payments to please Quebec. So, and now Stephen Harper is giving advice to Pierre Poilievre. So they are not conservative. They are only conservative in name. Yeah, they're afraid of speaking about conservative values when they are not popular.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to someone a while back that the current Conservative Party is the same party as Paul Martin back in the early 2000s, almost identical.
Almost identical.
But the Liberal Party has gone more left.
But now with Carney, that's why it's difficult for Poilievre. Carney is going more to the center. And now, the voters are looking at Carney and Poilievre, and they say, okay, they're almost the same. I will vote for the real Liberal. And that's why, Carney is in advance in the polls.
Yeah. So back in 2016, you were one of the only conservatives to march in the Gay Pride Parade.
Yeah.
Would you march in those still now? And why did you do it back then? How do you think about that now?
No, I wanted. I did it. Yes, you're right. I did that because for me, At that time, if you're gay or lesbian, that's your own choice. But now these parades are not about that anymore. They are promoting an ideology. They want, your kid to transition. And that's why I won't participate in that anymore. And I'm not anti-gay. I wanted to do that parade to show that I'm not anti-gay. And, I respect your right. But today, these parades these march are to promote an ideology, a transition. And for me, a kid is never born in a wrong body. A young girl cannot be a young boy. There's only two sexes. And we must cut all the fundings that is going to that ideology. And the federal government is giving a lot of money there. There's the drag queen, happy hours, or that's everywhere in our school. That's against Western civilization values, family values. So that's why I won't participate in a gay parade now
anymore. Yeah. What about the definition of marriage that changed in Canada? Do you agree with that definition changing? I'm
open to have a discussion in Parliament. If there's one of our MP who wants to bring a legislation about that, I'll say do it. The party line, when I was a conservative, I was against the dairy cartel, and I've been told, my leader, Andrew Scheer, told me at that time, if you speak against that, you won't be able to be a conservative anymore because that's not part of our platform. That party line in Parliament, we must stop that.
Yeah.
Our MPs and our candidates, when they will be elected, they will have a free vote. If they want to bring that, yes, bring that. We'll have a debate. It's same thing with abortion. Bring it. We need to have a legislation on abortion. I will ask our candidates to vote in line with our platform, but all the other things that it's not part of our platform, they will have to listen their constituents. They will have to vote in line with the person.
I like that because I asked Mark Stroll to come on the podcast and he wasn't allowed to from the national
They're not
campaign.
allowed because it's too dangerous for them. They're speaking, they're using slogan. He won't be able to repeat the slogan for an hour. So he cannot be here.
Yeah. So the PPC polls right now 4 to 6%. So likely you're not going to form government. Why focus on not just focus on some of the main issues you guys stand for, like the Green Party does, instead of having a really wide platform? Like, why not really just focus on the ones that are most important to you?
But that's what we are doing during this election. We have 22 policies on our website. And during the election, you cannot speak about 22 policies. You need to focus. So we focus on 5 of them. When I'm saying focus, in our advertising, mass immigration, that's another one. Climate change, it's another one. We need to withdraw from the Paris Accord. The DEI philosophy and the idea that, a kid can transition, that does not exist. We are speaking about that. And the economy, we are speaking about that because it's very different. Poilievre and the Liberals, they're okay with a trade war with the U.S. We won't win a trade war. The U.S. is 10 times bigger than us. We need to not impose counter tariffs. When they're doing that, they're taxing Canadians. And, the inflation is so high, we cannot afford that. That's not efficient. So for me, these policies are very important, and I'm speaking about that a lot during this election. But when we'll be in government, we will do everything that is on our platform. That's it.
Switching to COVID for my next question. I remember during COVID, especially the older generation of conservatives that I knew were very much bought into the lockdowns and the things that were happening because they only get their news from CBC and CTV. And so I think just the media in Canada in general is very corrupt and has deceived so many Canadians into thinking that the Liberal Party is actually doing good things, or about Pierre Poilievre. If you got into power, how would you push for a non-biased media? Like, how do we go back to being able to trust in media again? I know you believe in like private media and stuff like that, but how do you shut that down? Because it is a very big, powerful organizations that are pushing these narratives that seem to really be able to shape the views of Canadians.
Yeah, the way to do that is to cut the funding, not only to Radio-Canada and CBC, $1.2 billion. Actually, Poilievre will cut the funding to CBC, but he won't cut the funding to Radio-Canada because Radio-Canada is more popular in Quebec. There's no logic behind that, but only politics. And he won't cut the funding to the other mainstream media, CTV, the Global Mail. They're $800 million. the federal government is giving to mainstream media. So it's a $2 billion. We will
and
cut.
so if you became prime minister, how quickly can you cut something like that? Like practically
in a
overnight?
year. In a year.
In a year?
If you want to speak about cut, we can balance the budget in 1 year. Poilievre is not speaking about that. He's afraid to speak about cuts.
And if that got cut from the media, all that funding, would
they may go bankrupt, and I'm okay with that. If they don't change their editorial line, maybe Canadians won't give them money. I want the media to be independent, not dependent on money coming from the federal government. Yes. That's the real media.
So you talked about supply management for a few times already, and the area we live in here in Chilliwack is predominantly conservative, but also a farming community. Yeah. And I remember in the leadership race, when you came out against supply management, you lost a lot of support from the farmers.
I didn't win because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's cool though that you stood by it regardless of losing votes, because that's being principled. But what would you? Can you explain why you're against the system, and what's your message to those farmers that are they really rely on the system for security, and so they're scared and they're going to go broke, and so how would you speak to that?
Yeah. First, I want to speak to Canadian consumers. Why I want to get rid of that? It's because Canadian consumers are paying twice the price for milk, poultry, and eggs if you compare that with prices in the U.S. The system is a communist system. The dairy producers and these producers under supply management are fixing the production, and they produce only for the Canadian market. They cannot export, and they are fixing the price. So we are the only country on this planet that is having a system like that. If that was a very good system, somebody will do the same, but they don't, because it's a communist system and we are paying consumers. What I'm telling the dairy producers, and a lot of them know that the end of that system is near. They understand that. President Trump tweeted 3 times about that, because now to have that system, we need to impose tariff of 300% for all these import coming from other countries. And that's why, U.S. Milk producers, dairy producers cannot export their milk in Canada. They won't be competitive with 300% tariff. So Trump is very...
But isn't there a certain cap they have to hit before that tariff even comes into place? So we're not even at that cap?
3%. They can export 3%, and after that, 3% in our market. Yeah. And after that, the 300% is there. So they cannot export. So that being said, President Trump said, I want to have a deal, and you need to abolish that. His secretary in charge of commerce said the same thing, and he is serious about that. And Poilievre and Carney said, we won't touch that. If they don't touch that, if they don't put that on the table and abolish it, we won't have a trade deal with U.S. And so they're saying to all the manufacturing sector in Canada, you won't have access to the U.S. We won't be able to have a trade deal with the U.S. because we want to protect a little cartel and a special interest group. That's crazy. If they're doing that, we won't be able to have a deal. That's very bad for the economy. What I'm telling to the dairy producer, some of them understand that it is the end of that system. It's coming. I'm telling them, and I said that 10 years ago, that we need to give them fair compensation for their quota. They have to pay right now between $20,000 to $25,000 a piece of paper to have the right to sell the milk of a cow. If you abolish that, they won't have to pay that. And the federal government will have to pay back the quota. And so what we will do, we will give them pay back the quota the first year. They will have all that money. They will be able to improve their productivity. They will be able to grow, to buy other dairy producers, to become, to have an economy of scale. And they will have 5 years, because we'll do a transition period of 5 years without having competition coming from the US. So they will have the money the first year. They will have 5 years to be more productive. And after that, we'll open our borders at one condition. I know that some dairy producers in the US are giving hormones to their cow. Not all of them, some of them. If they're doing that, they won't be able to export their milk in Canada because Canadian dairy producers are not doing that. So that's sanitary legislation, and that's legal to do that. So they will be able to export, the US, they will be able to export their milk if they're following our sanitary legislation. And after that, they will be able, our dairy producers will be able to export their dairy, poultry, and eggs. Very good products. So that's the solution. And with that, I'm pretty sure that, they will be able to be competitive.
And so what about like the southern part of the country? They'll be taken care of because 90% of Canadians live within 100 kilometers of the border. But like especially the more remote areas of Canada, wouldn't that really, blowing it wide open, really increase the price of milk and eggs to those people in those areas?
No, because it's what they're doing right now with the Dairy Commission. On the Dairy Commission, that's the dairy producers. They are fixing the price, and the price is good for all over the country, everywhere in the country. Yeah. So that will be free competition. So prices will go down everywhere.
And if you look at other industries like that are regulated, like the chicken has supply management and fishing is regulated, and therefore licenses have a lot of value. So why is the dairy farming in particular that it seems that the libertarians are so after?
Yeah, so we have a supply management in dairy, poultry, eggs, and maple syrup. So we need to end that. Actually, in the beef production, you don't have that. In other, agriculture production, you don't have that. I know that in the fisheries, they are giving some license to catch, but it's line with, they want to preserve it. They're doing that because they want to preserve. They want that industry to be there in 20 years. So they have to do that to control the stock, and it's based on science. So, for all the other agriculture products, they're not under supply management. So they will be able to compete, and they must be the first to ask the government to be able to export their products. Now, at the end of the year, they are, and we have some videos of that, they are putting milk down the drain, and because they have to produce only to meet the request of the Canadian population. So if they produce more, all that will go
away.
Yeah, go away.
I just had a doctor come on my show recently, Edward Less. He's a pediatrician in Calgary. He spoke out against some of the mutilation happening to kids and the transgender rights. Yeah. One of the things he also shared was how the Canadian medical system is crumbling and broken. And he says because there's so much bureaucracy in it and so much management. And one of the other things he shared was he heard that 1/3 of Canadians are dependent on the government. 1/3 of Canadians work for the government, or I think it's more now. And then the other third pays for all of that. That when you have such a huge difference in who's making it all work, how do you break a system like that where it actually is going back to how the majority of Canadians are working and not taking?
That's a great question. That is why we have a big fat government, not only here in Canada but in Western countries. The government is growing because first of all, all these Western countries are indebted, big deficit, big debt, and now they want their people to be more dependent on the government with social program that they cannot afford. And by doing that, they're increasing the debt. So we need to tell them the truth. That's why I'm not afraid to say we need to cut. Poilievre and Carney won't speak about the cuts. We need to cut the federal government. We need to be able to have real tax cut. Right now, Poilievre and Carney said they will give you, for Poilievre, $14 billion tax cut. For Carney, it's around $6 billion tax cut. But they don't tell you where they will take the money. They will borrow the money and they will add that to the deficit. And we know that the deficit of today is the taxes of tomorrow or the inflation of tomorrow. So it's not a real tax cut. What we need to do, and that's tough. That's why, you need to speak about that and educate people about it. We need to balance the budget to be sure that we'll have a smarter. Cut foreign aid, $10 billion that we can save. We can cut corporate welfare, all the subsidies to big corporations, $25 billion. Cut the equalization payment, $26 billion that the federal government is taking from Western Canada and giving that to poor province in Quebec. We're going to cut that by half, $13 billion that we will save. Why? Because that will give the right incentive for Quebec and New Brunswick to develop their own natural resources that they have. There's a moratorium in Quebec on shale gas, on the exploitation of shale gas. They don't do that because if they do that, they will be richer and they will have fewer money from the equalization payment. Cut that by half. Also, I can speak about the the media. I said $2 billion there. Yeah. The Indigenous affair. Trudeau tripled the amount that the federal government is giving to First Nation the last 10 years. The amount today is $32 billion. We can, take $5 billion out, and there's no, clean water on reserve. I don't know where that money is going. There's no transparency. We need to have transparency, cut there to be able to balance the budget. So the deficit of this year will be $50 billion. We are able to achieve that by cutting real expenses that we don't need. And after that, with the surplus, we will lower taxes. Only with all the surplus, that will be a real tax cut. But you need to have the courage to speak about that, and they don't. They don't want. They're telling people new programs like the dental care program. We're going to cut that. It's under provincial jurisdictions. Healthcare, it's provincial jurisdiction. Poilievre won't cut it. We have a big fat government that is interfering in provincial jurisdictions, and that's why you have a separatist movement in Alberta and a separatist movement in Quebec. We need to respect the Constitution, so we'll cut these national programs that are under provincial jurisdictions.
So I think I can see, let's say you get into government and you're passing a lot of these things with the current judicial system in Canada, which just seems to be very corrupt. Do you see that a lot of this stuff will just get squashed again by the Supreme Court? Like I think about Trinity Western University. They wanted to open a law school a couple of years ago, and they were blocked by the Supreme Court. And you see that in other areas with the trucker convoy and those people that got arrested. And it's, for me, so infuriating when you see a pedophile gets 6 months or no jail time, and Tamara Lynch is going to jail, and those things like that. So how do you reform the judicial system, which is a lot harder than just what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for the judiciary system, we need to have judges that before being appointed, I want them to be in front of a parliamentary commissions, and I want the members of parliament to be able to ask questions like they're doing in the US. But speaking, and now when they are nominated, they are there for almost life, But the new one, we need to be able to know them a little bit more, to be able to ask questions and a real debate in parliaments before appointing a judge. But I just want to give you an example about tough on crimes, like you just said. I was a conservative, and Harper, and we did pass good legislation to be tough on crime. Minimum sentences. And you're right about that. It went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and the Supreme Court of Canada said it is unconstitutional, and so our legislation was not enforced anymore. So what we must do, and there's a clause in the Constitution, non-abstanding clause, we must use that. It's the sovereignty of the Parliament. So, you pass a legislation tough on crime, and also you use that clause in the Constitution. Notwithstanding the court, this legislation will be enforced for 5 years. That is, and we must not be afraid to use that, because that's the clause that is telling people that is the sovereignty of the Parliament. The Parliament decided that, and so the Supreme Court of Canada cannot change that. And Quebec is doing that right now with the bill to protect the language, the French language. Yeah. They're doing that, notwithstanding the federal government. We want to protect that. It's important for Quebec, so the Supreme Court won't be able to interfere. And I think we must use that. That's the only way to pass legislation, and being sure that the court won't be able to repeal these legislations. And that's there, but you need the courage to be there to do that. Poilievre and Carney are not speaking about that.
one of the things that's happened in the last 8 years is the order and councils that Prime Minister Trudeau had done, especially when it takes like gun rights.
Yeah.
Just with the stroke of a pen, all of a sudden, Canadians don't have the guns anymore that they used to be able to own or are not allowed to use them. That seems like an extreme amount of power just through order and council to do really bad things. So 2 questions. What do you think about gun rights? And will you use order and council if you became Prime Minister to push certain things which don't actually need the approval of Parliament or and the people?
No, what we need to cut, there's too many legislation at the federal level that are not respecting the Constitution and, are interfering in provincial jurisdictions. You need to look at all that legislation and being sure that, you will repeal all the legislation that are not in line with the Constitution first. Second, what I will do with gun rights, we will repeal all the legislation that Trudeau did, against gun owners. For me, that's your property. You have a property right, and the federal government must not have the right to come at your house and say, oh, because of the look of your gun, now this gun is not your gun. We need to put that in a legislation. Now the RCMP can decide by regulation, this gun is illegal today, and, it will be an illegal gun, and you won't have the right to own it, and the RCMP can come and take it. So put that in the legislation, everything, no more latitudes, no more regulations. You put that in the legislation, and that's the members of Parliament who will decide which gun is legal or not. And I will ask your people to go on our website and read our gun policy, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, click on platform, click on gun, everything is there. And also what we must do, you must be able to use your gun to defend your property and yourself. We need to change the criminal code and have the...
I like that. That's good.
And have the doctrine, the Castle doctrine like in the US. Now, if you defend yourself and you use your gun, the court will look, okay, the guy came with a baseball bat, and your answer was with a gun. So, you didn't have the right because it was not the reasonable force that you used. So that's why we will sue you, the individual who tried to defend himself and their property. So with the Castle doctrine, that won't happen. You have the right to defend yourself. Somebody is coming in your house. He has a baseball bat and you have a gun. You have the right to use your gun. So we need to change that. We are the only party who's speaking about that.
So you've been called everything from a maverick to a madman to, everything in between.
Racist in the beginning in 2019.
Yeah, racist too.
Because we wanted to have fewer immigrants at that time.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception about you that people don't, that you see out in the media or wherever it is? What's a big misconception about you that people have?
But, during COVID-19, there were, mainstream media was throwing name at us and at me because I was there for freedom of choice with an informed consent, and I did a lot of rallies. So I was a complotist, I was a bad guy. But right now, more people are curious, a little bit more curious, who is that guy? They did hear something in the past about me, being, a former conservative and things like that. And what I like is people are more curious to look at who is Maxime Bernier. And if they look at our platform and what we promote as idea, it's all about common sense. So right now it is more difficult after 6 years to discredit me or the People's Party. Because, what is the most important in politics is credibility. And, you can look at podcasts that I did 6 years ago or videos of me 10 years ago. I was saying the same thing. And it's very precious, credibility, because the credibility of a traditional politician is almost zero. But we are gaining credibility because we are always saying the same thing. So nobody, and my opponent, my political opponents, they don't want they don't want to have any debate about our platform because they know that our platform is very popular with the membership of the Conservative Party. So what they try to say, throwing name, Bernier is not real, that's not a real party, they won't win, so don't vote for him. They don't want to have a discussion. And that's why they don't want me to participate in the national debates, because everybody will be able to see that what I'm telling you, it's common sense and we'll grow faster. But but they don't want that. So the credibility that we have is precious, and more people understand and they can see that we are very different.
And will you be in the debates this time?
No, they created a new criteria. The last time, they said, Bernier, if you want to participate in the national debate, you need to have 4% at the previous election. So in 2021, at the election of 2021, they created that criteria, but in 2019 we had only 1.6%. But at this election in 2025, the previous election in 2021, we had 5%. So, but they decided to create a new criteria and change the rules, and I won't be able to participate. That Leaders Debate Commission is only there to exclude the People's Party in the debate. And you must ask the question, who is at the head, who is at the board of that Leaders Debate Commission? Former Conservatives MPs. They don't want me, they don't want to debate Poilievre, because Poilievre won't be able. He won't be able. He will... I will tell him the truth about everything, and deep down, they don't want the conservative voters to hear that, because they're going to say, oh, Bernier is right about, ending the crazy climate change. There's only 2 sexes. Actually, Poilievre, I must admit, said that there's 2 genders. That's good. He didn't want to say 2 sexes. He said 2 genders. But after that, the journalist said, if you apply to have your passport, you have male, female, and X. Is that mean that you will have only male and female when you will apply for a passport? He didn't answer the questions. He said, oh, that's not important. There's all the other things more important than that. He didn't want to answer the questions. He's afraid. So, if more people can know that, we will have more support.
What do you think about Trump?
Trump, he did a campaign to make America great again. And that's what he's doing. He wants to repatriate all the manufacturing industry in the US. He wants to create jobs for Americans. I'm okay with that. I want to do the same in Canada. I want to make Canada great again. I'm working for Canadians. And I understand what he's doing. And the tariffs, it's only negotiation. I've read his book, The Heart of the Deal, and he's always doing that. Look, the last one, he did impose tariff on every country. And after that, they are saying, oh, no, okay. He said for the next 90 days, it won't apply. And all these countries now are coming and having a negotiation with Trump. That is what he wants to do. But we said Trump, the conservative and the liberals, they said Trump is dangerous. He wants to integrate our country, the 51st state. He was saying that was a joke. But for the conservative and the liberal, they use that, and they are promoting fake patriotism. That's what they're doing. We won't be the 51st state. That was a joke. Canada is not to sell, and Trump knows that. He just wants to have a better deal. But Carney and Poilievre are using that to impose taxes on us, 25% tariff. It won't hurt the American. It is hurting us. We are paying the counter tariffs. It's another tax, 25%. And Poilievre is okay with that. And Carney is okay with that. And they're saying, we love you so much, Canadians, that we will impose you more. And by the way, it can create a recession. You will lose your job, but that's okay.
So what would your strategy be?
No counter tariff, reopening the free trade agreement right now, putting everything on the table, including supply management. That's the only way to have a deal. And for our economy to be more productive, balancing the budget in 1 year with all the cuts that I said, and with all the surplus at the second year, lower corporate income tax, have flat tax on business, no more capital gains tax. We'll do that with the surplus and having a more productive economy. The corporate income tax in Canada, federal and provincial, together, it's 26%. The corporate income tax in the US is 24%. And Trump wants to lower that more. So our businesses are not competitive. We need to cut that. We need our businesses to be able to have more more of their own profit. Like that, they will be able to reinvest in Canada, being more productive, giving better salaries to their employees. Let's have that reform. But Poilievre is speaking about, a little cut there, a little cut there with borrowed money. It won't do anything. So that's the only solution to have a deal with President Trump. Let's do it.
Do you think the Canadians as a cultural in their culture are somewhat working against them? And what I mean by that is like the Canadians are the British. The Americans fought against the British, and they have it in their almost their DNA to fight against the government. And it seems like Canadians are in a lot of times apathetic and just say yes, sounds good, move on, and just like I don't want to be left alone. I don't have that fight. But at the same time, I know Canadians are very strong and don't want to just get rolled on, which seems like has been happening for a long time. How do we get this back into the culture of not just accepting what the government has, given us, but to get that fight back?
About what you just said, you're right. If you look at it, couple of years ago, that was a little bit more like that. But look what happened with the Freedom Convoy, the truckers. We were the only country who did that. That was an example for all these other Western countries. We did stand up and fight for it, and we were successful. Couple of months after the Freedom Convoy, all these draconian measures just disappear. It was because of Canadians, freedom fighters. And now, in Canada, Canadians are losing their job. You have inflation that is maybe about 5-6%. We are in a recession. I believe that we are in a stagnation. Inflation and stagnation, stagflation right now. So everything is not going well in our country. You have that mass immigration, and I believe that Canadians are more ready to fight now, and they understand that the problems that we have right now, economically, socially, it's because of our government. And, I can tell you, this party is growing. That's a demonstration that more people are ready to fight. And they will. I believe in people. I have faith in people, and they will fight. More and more people will come and fight. And that's the only way to save this country.
I can't help but think, a lot of the things you're saying, I agree with and get me excited at the potential of like what it would be like to have a government like that in Canada and really have this country back, because it sucks. I'm an immigrant. I moved here when I was 5 from Holland, and just to see this country deteriorating and losing my freedoms, it's very discouraging. But I can't help but think of vote splitting. If let's say you get 20 or 25% of the vote, and the Conservatives do, then the Liberals still get in again, with their any government, and it just keeps getting worse again. How do you think about vote splitting? How do you think other people should think about vote splitting?
Yeah, there's no such thing as an individual splitting the vote. You own your own vote, Who's splitting the vote as a political party? It is Poilievre. To win, Poilievre will need the support of all the ridings in the big GTA around Toronto. There's more riding there than in all the province of Alberta. And he will need the support also of leftist people living in Vancouver. So he's going to the left, he's pandering to them. And that's why, you don't see any difference with Poilievre and Carney on the most important policies. So as a political party, Poilievre is doing that to win. For us, I'm telling you, if you vote for your ideas, if you vote for what you believe, you'll have more chances to have what you want. And so by doing that, the People's Party will be more influential. And I believe that we can have our first candidate elected at this election. And what we will do, we will support Poilievre in Parliament when he will be a real conservative. And we will shame him when he won't. We will vote in line with him when he will table real conservative legislations. And so that's a win-win for you, because, we will be your insurance policy that Poilievre will act like a real conservative. Will push Poilievre in the right direction. And so the more influential our ideas will become, the more big changes we'll be able to have in this country. So for me, I'm telling people, vote in line with your ideas. And don't blame me if Poilievre is a weak leader. Don't blame me. Poilievre, first, for me, is not a leader. Like I told you, he's following the public opinion. He doesn't have any conviction. He will change with the public opinion. Like, the Freedom Convoy. He was in the House pushing the vaccine. When we had that Freedom Convoy, Oh, he looked at the wind and he said, okay, I must be. And he did a photo op with a tracker. That was it. He's good as, looking at the poles and the wind. And he doesn't have any conviction. So if you want real changes, vote for what you believe. And don't blame me if Poilievre is not a leader, is a follower, and is weak. He's weak because he doesn't have the courage to speak about abortion, to speak about, ending the Paris Accord. And, what I don't understand really, it's people out west. I love you guys, but Poilievre is taking your vote for granted, and he's not doing anything. In his platform, he won't speak about the equalization formula. People in Alberta and here in BC, they're fed up about that. They're mad about that. There's a separatist movement in Alberta because of that. Poilievre is not speaking about that. Paris Accord, you want to control and to exploit your own natural resources. You want to get out of the Paris Accord. Poilievre is not speaking about that. Everything that is important for you, Westerner, Poilievre won't speak about that, and you are still voting for him. Don't blame me,
Good answer. What do you think about the Indian Act in Canada? So we had the residential school issues, which were awful. A lot of Christians actually took part of the travesty there. And I think reconciliation is needed to a certain degree. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but what I don't like to see is how much money is going towards
$32 billion.
Yes. Just like if you have, a really rich dad that gives everything to his son doesn't turn into be a hard worker. He becomes dependent and becomes lazy and doesn't work, right? Like handouts don't work. Yeah. And I also don't like two classes of citizens, that they have the rights to say, hey, no, you can't go through this land with the pipeline because of whatever it is. I also understand, hey, a wrong was done. And it needs to be made right, but that can't be indefinitely either. So how do you think through that? What would be an alternative to what is currently in place?
But in Canada, first, there's no systemic racism. There's only one legislation that is racist, is the Indian Act. That is a racist legislation. We need to repeal that legislation. I'm saying that. I'm meeting, First Nation leaders, and they agree with that. We need to have, a kind of a property right on reserve. On reserve right now, it's a communist system. You live there, you don't own your own house, you're not responsible, and it's a communist system. We need to have a kind of a property right on reserve. We need to change that. And when I'm speaking about that and telling that to First Nation, they agree with me. What they want to know, what will be the next step? What will be the new relationship with the First Nation? I don't have all the details, but we need to sit with them and have a real negotiation, because yes, I want them to participate in our society fully. And so what we can do, like in Australia, what they did, they gave a lump sum. This is what we are giving you. That's it. That's all. And after that, participate in that society. I don't know what will be the real solution, but we must start by having a new relationship with them and repealing the Indian Acts and being open to the negotiation. But at the same time, we need to respect our treaties that we did sign with them. So put all that together, and I believe that, we'll be able to have a couple of negotiations and solve that for forever.
Okay, I want to ask you a non-political question. As a Christian, I'm curious, who do you believe Jesus was?
Well, I believe, I'm a Catholic, and, I believe that Jesus came here to save us. And, that's my own belief. I understand that others don't agree with that. Yeah. But we have freedom of religion in this country. So for me, it's important in my life. I had tough time in politics. I did resign as a minister because of a big scandal at that time. I left documents in my ex-girlfriend, and she was, I had to think about all that and decide if I want to stay in politics or not. And I went to the monk for a week, and with no TV, no media, and just thinking about what is happening, what I want in life. And I decided to fight for what I believe, for a better country after that. And I decided to stay in politics. That was in 2008. And I'm fighting that. So I hope that I'm doing the right thing. But my faith is my faith, and
So
people.
so you believe Jesus was the Son of God, and he came onto this earth to.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
And was that something that you grew up with, or was that?
Yeah, I must admit that my grandmom was very religious, and we learned that from her, not from my dad or mom, but from my grandmom. And I used to go to a church every week when I was young. Now, not. I must admit, no, I'm not going to the church every week. But yeah, that was part of my education.
Okay. And do you remember some of the things your grandma taught you that you miss some memories that stick behind?
Oh, yes. She always told us, if you do something and, there's no secret in life. Everything that you're doing, everybody can know that today, maybe not right now. So don't do something that you won't be proud about it if somebody can know that you did something. So be open to yourself, and you can do a lot of mistakes. And that's why in both, my friends are entrepreneurs. When they started their first business, they were not successful. Some of them went bankrupt, but they try again, and now they're successful. So in life, believe in yourself, fight for what you believe, try to stay honest, and, you may be able to have a good life.
So Judeo-Christian values.
It's part of our Constitution. If you read the Constitution, it said this country has been built on the supremacy of God. That is in our Constitution.
Supremacy of God.
Supremacy of God and the rule of law. So what is the rule of law? Everybody must be equal before the law. Now it's not there. You're a lesbian, black woman. You have more rights than a white man. So everybody must be equal. That DEI philosophy is destroying our society. Our society must be based on meritocracy, not because, you're black or white or heterosexual. No, it must be based on your competence. And a nice anecdote about that, at every election, we have the media. The media is coming and said, how many black people do you have? How many Jewish people do you have? How many gay do you have as candidates? They want to know that. Mm-hmm. They're asking that to every party at every election. And I told them, I don't know and I don't want to know. My candidates, they're with us because they share our values. That's it. That's all. Yes, we had Jewish candidates and Christian candidates and pro-life candidates and pro-choice candidates, but they are here and they are fighting with us and candidate for the People's Party because they believe in our platform, in our vision for this country. So when the journalists asked us that question at every election, we don't know, we don't want to know. They're there for us, and because they share our values and they share Canadian values, that's why they're our candidates.
Okay. So most of my audience is conservative.
I know that.
Just a final message to them. If you can just speak to them directly. I think traditionally most of them have voted for conservative. I think you answered a lot of my questions today that probably answered some of theirs, but just final thoughts.
Don't be scared, don't be scared, vote in line with your values. I know that I was a conservative before. I did, I did support Harper at that time. But look what the Conservative Party is offering me today. They are not offering you what you want. And so you may have a liberal government or a conservative government, but you will be mad in a couple of years because when Harper has his majority, he didn't do any bold reforms. And Poilievre will do the same. So send a strong message and vote in line with your values, will be more influential. And maybe Poilievre will do some survey and focus group and he will say, okay, I must have that in my platform if I want to be elected. But now he's taking your vote for granted out west and he's pandering to the east and you're fed up of that. But that will be the same after the election if you are still voting for the Conservative. Anyway, the People's Party will be there. If you don't support us at this election, you'll have a chance at the next election. We'll be there. And maybe at that time, you'll be ready to support your ideas.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time and coming on. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it also. That was very fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Maxime.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you have any questions or comments, we'll talk about it on the briefcase in the barn with me and Gary in a few weeks as well. So thanks for listening.